Welcome to the show, everybody. Joseph Robert, the fantasy football counselor, in the studio here online with Tom Santinello. We've got an exciting episode, Tom. We're talking the review and recap of an amazing documentary we watched on Netflix called The Last Dance. What's going on, Tom?
What's going on? Good morning.
Got to talk about it, man. It was a good documentary, and we're going off. If you guys are regulars and used to my regular content, I want to start expanding the brand and adding more of stuff that I'm passionate about and more things that Tom is passionate about and things that we're actually going to talk about that are trending as well. So we want to talk about trending topics, and The Last Dance was something that everybody was watching, especially with the world situation the way that it is now. The timing of this documentary was perfect. Jordan, my favorite player of all time, the greatest of all time. So I thought that we had to do a recap to talk about this. And I know if you're a fantasy fan, you're definitely a sports fan, you can appreciate this. And I definitely want to dive into more trending topics, latest news and notes with Tom Santinello. So this is a Fire and Ice show, and we are talking about The Last Dance documentary. Are you ready to roll into this, Tom?
I'm ready.
Before we get into that, guys, I want you guys, there's going to be an ongoing debate in the comments. So in the comments below, let's solve the debate. Jordan versus LeBron. At the end of this, or you guys are going to know who I like more. I think it's pretty obvious. Jordan versus LeBron. Who is the GOAT? And Tom, this is very simple here when you're looking at this question, and it's going to be answered very easily. So the next time there's another great player, he's just going to be compared to Jordan, and then this debate is solved, right?
If it was only that simple.
It is that simple. Jordan is the greatest of all. Why you making?
Yeah, but some people have their own bias and their own opinions. So,
are you making a case for LeBron, the guy that doesn't finish near the end, or what?
No, not at all. But I'm just saying some people think different.
Yeah, fair enough. They do.
And anyway.
All right. So you guys can leave a comment below, smash a thumbs up as well. Let's dive into this recap of the show. I mean, it was a great show. We just finished it today. I mean, 10-episode documentary here, The Last Dance, highlighting the road to the Last Dance, which was the 98 finals where they played the Utah Jazz. And we won't spoil it too much. I mean, there's nothing to spoil here because the results are already in. Everybody knows who won. So let's just recap and talk about it, Tom. What did you think of the documentary?
Overall, it was very good. It was a little different. I thought it was going to be more about Michael Jordan. And in a sense, you know, it documented the whole team with obviously an eye on him. You can't really do it without him. A little, the negative part of it was a little confusing on the way, I guess hard to follow sometimes on the way they did it. Every episode covered, you know, the last season they played together, The Last Dance, and then they jumped around with the other, you know, the other seasons in order, from his rookie year onto 97. I just thought maybe it would have been better if they did a little more chronological, easy to follow, but I guess they wanted to, you know, I don't want to say make it like, you know, those movies that jump around a little bit from scene to scene. So it could have been a little difficult to follow at times. That was my only negative. I would have liked to see a little bit more about Michael just because I grew up watching him and I respect the game and I respect the greatness, but it's good to know, you can nitpick on anything, but I think overall it was a great documentary worth every minute of my time, which I can't say that about a lot of things.
All right. I found it a little slow the first couple episodes, but it definitely picked up. And it was good that they featured guys like Rodman and Pippen and Kerr. Then they give you a little bit of backstory of Steve Kerr losing his dad in Beirut. It was a really good show. Again, the chronological order could have been in order. Now, a lot of shows are doing this, going flashback and then coming back, and they're doing this back and forth type time thing. And I think it's kind of like a new trend with TV series now. So I guess they're kind of going with that. But yeah, I definitely would have thought I would have saw a little bit more of his family life, a little bit more of his personal life in there. I mean, there was a whole thing with his dad, but maybe a little bit more into his home, how he was overcoming certain things. You know, it just was more of a broad team-based kind of approach, which it was good. It was very good.
Yeah, I mean, I think, though, he had Final Cut. Maybe he seems to be a private person. They wouldn't even let him film in the house. I think he probably didn't want that stuff in there too much. That would be my guess. But right. It's just a guess. I would have liked to see a little more on his I mean, the guy averaged like over 30 points so many years in the NBA. Like nobody does that. I would have liked to see a little more of him, and especially in the early years. That's what I would like to see, maybe because I know more. I mean, I was 10 years old when they won their first title. And then you start to appreciate his second run after the first three-peat. Right. I start to really, you know, that's when I was really a fan in high school. So for me, you start to understand and remember things. But there's a lot of behind the scenes footage that you've never seen. And there's a lot of things you just forgot. You know, I mean, they came close to losing a few of those series, and I didn't really remember it being that close. But overall, it dove into his life. I mean, they try to bring everybody down these days anyway, talk about his gambling, talk about this. It seems like they went after everybody, though. You know, Scottie Pippen, you know, for the injury, the rehab, you know, Jerry Krause, and they go after the negatives on a lot of things. And, you know, you mentioned Steve Kerr. You know, Steve Kerr is an interesting one because I think he fit well in the last episode, the last week of it. I think he got a little too much airtime in the beginning, but he's really mostly only relevant because he's the coach of the Warriors at this point. If he was the coach of the Warriors, he wouldn't have been in those interviews that much. Yeah, it was pretty sad. I didn't know that happened to his dad, and that was very, you know, very touching. You know, he was a role player, average under 10 points. I don't think he ever averaged 10 points a game. He played about what 13, 14 years in the NBA, maybe 15. And, you know, John Paxson, Kerr, just to see the way the teams were set up by Jerry Krause, who was, I mean, he traded for Scottie Pippen. He signed all those players, you know, those role players, and he really deserves a lot of credit for building a team. You know, you can compare it to, you know, you're a football fan. It's just the other thing I want to take away out of it is you just see what the NBA is today and what back then is just totally different.
Well, going back to Steve Kerr thing, I think they gave him enough airtime, and to his credit, I mean, the guy did stick up to Jordan. I don't think a lot of people did, where he took the punch in the face, where they talk about that. So I don't know where he punched. I think it was the face. Either way. So I think there's a lot of credit to him, and he did make that clutch shot in a certain game there. I think it was I think it was 96 or 97. He made that clutch shot, won the game. So, I mean, he was an important factor, but definitely not a star guy like a Pippen. But I think the airtime was properly done. But going back again, you just said the game. And it was such a great time to be a kid playing during that time because there's no social media, there's no Twitter, there's no Facebook, there's no YouTube, there's none of that. And the characters were larger than life. And I remember that clear as day. I would go to the shoe store and I'd try to pick out these shoes. And there's this kamikaze Sean Kemp shoes. And then you had the Jordans. And it was like completely larger than life. And then Grant Hill and how he was promoted. Remember Grant Hill drinks Sprite. Such a great time to be alive. But the thing about it that was that I liked was the physical toughness. And that's going back to, you know, the way they played the Pistons. It was just the Knicks as well with Mason and Ewing. And it was just a tougher game. And now you're seeing these people get, you know, blown on. You get a little bit of air and they're flopping. And I think it's ridiculous. And it's very hard for me, a guy that grew up in the, you know, late 80s and 90s, to watch the way basketball is played now. I can't stomach it. And that's one of the main reasons why I kind of gravitated to football, where, you know, you can get hit and it's okay. So what do you think, man? Do you think it's just soft, right? Don't you agree that it's very soft compared to the way it was?
The game has changed. It's more of an isolation game. What can I do for myself rather than what can I do for the team? You know, that's one part of it. You mentioned social media. I mean, like Jordan even said, one of my favorite lines was Republicans buy sneakers too. Right. And he didn't want to be an activist, even though there was no social media. You see guys, I mean, there was an unfortunate incident, I believe, in the Georgia murder. I think it was a couple months ago, but the guy just got arrested now. And, you know, everybody, which, you know, rightfully so, it was an unfortunate incident. But like Jordan didn't get involved in that kind of stuff. They said it. He didn't want to be an activist. He didn't want to be in politics. Now today, like, and even if he had the platform, he wouldn't have done it. He said so himself. So I think with that, like the attention he got, the just how much, what people that didn't understand or forgot, how much of a worldwide icon he was. Still, right. I mean, that Jordan brand he created is, I mean, you walk in Foot Locker, you walk in anywhere, or you just walk down the street, you probably see somebody wearing something Jordan. His imprint that he left on as an icon is bar none. And now back to the game. I mean, I could talk about that for hours. If you remember, I grew up in the Boston area, Rhode Island, watching the Celtics and all that stuff. And I mean, they were a tough team. But then you just go down the list, Bill Laimbeer beating people up. I mean, it was fun. It was tough. I mean, Karl Malone was tough in the paint, as you saw in the series. It was tough, and it was fun, and it was exciting. Now, like you said, the game has just changed, and I see like guys getting $100 million, like Kyrie Irving. I mean, he did win a title, and he was key in LeBron in that run and in that playoff series. I think it was against the Warriors. But you see all these guys making 20 million a year, 30 million a year, Chris Paul never winning, not doing anything. And it's just a shame because it just seems like it's such a different game. And you go back and you watch the Sean Kemps, the Gary Paytons talking shit to each other.
Right. Barkley.
Yeah. Oh, I love Barkley. He was one of my favorites.
Tough, man.
I mean, yeah, like you said, the Knicks, Patrick Ewing, Charles Oakley. I mean, they're just like hammering people. I mean, and it's John Starks, the member of the brawl with the Heat and the Knicks. That was basketball. To me, I don't even care as much. I grew up watching Big East basketball as well, where it was physical. And now it's just the type, like the Carmelo Anthony's the perfect example. He's, you just go down, you fluff it, you score, you look at how many points can I score?
It's weak.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about Jordan's mental game here near the end, but I want to talk, I've written this all out. I looked at every game here. Let's talk about the first three-peat where he had the 90, 91, 91, 92, and 92, 93, and he's beaten the best. So 90, 91 beat the Lakers. They swept the Pistons before that. Pistons a tough team. Then they come back and they beat the Lakers. That's phenomenal. Jordan was averaging 31.2 points per game. And I want to note here, he actually got MVP in all the finals, every final game. I mean, no one's ever done that. And he won 6. Then 91, 92 ends up beating Clyde Drexler at the time, was phenomenal. So he beat the Portland Trailblazers. They beat him in 6, again, MVP final. Then 92, 93, he beats the Suns. He beats Barkley, which was very, very tough to do. So, I mean, he beat the best. I mean, this is just the first I keep calling it three-peat that he's got there, right? So, I mean, that right there, those 3 right there just show how tough he was based on who he beat, right?
Well, they had to get through the Pistons to face the Lakers the first year.
Right.
Lakers won 5 titles in the 80s. That was sort of the end of their run with that core group. And then you look at it after that, and you said, I mean, Portland, they had a good team that year, but he made easy work of them. And then the Suns were the toughest team they probably faced.
Right.
Maybe in the whole championship run, maybe the last Utah team was pretty good, but he just went through everybody. But just to get there, to go through New York, to go through Indiana, to go through those teams is just, it's a slugfest every series.
Yeah, just to go through that timeline. So again, wins those 3. Then, he wins 6 out of 8 years. He wins championships, by the way. The 2 years that he was off, well, the 1 year he went to baseball. He lost his dad July 23rd, 1993. North Carolina, he was carjacked by 2 teens. That's another story. Yeah. So he had to take the time off. He wanted to do what his dad wanted him to do, kind of do as baseball. I grew up playing baseball. Took a crack at that. And had he kept going with baseball, he would have probably been successful as well with that. Then came back 93, 94, lost the Knicks in the second round of the playoffs. That was because I think he was just trying to get his chemistry back, and he was kind of a little out of shape, because if you watch a documentary, you see him training, and you probably know, you've worked with athletes more than me, Tom. If you kind of carve your body out to be a basketball player, then you're trying to get it to baseball, then you got to come back to basketball. I'm sure that's a tough transition, right? Was that the factor why they didn't win in 93, 94? Do you think it's because he wasn't in full shape?
I mean, that's part of it, but 99% of the athletes don't think like that. He was just one of a kind. Most athletes, just get with a trainer and whatever, but he took things to a different level. So for him, that was possibly a factor, but I just think he came back at the end of the regular season. He was just a little rusty. I mean, he had to play basketball in a year and a half or whatever it was. So right. I just think it was more rust, in my opinion.
I agree. I could see that. And a little bit of both too, right? And the team just trying to get back into the chemistry and gelling, right? And then 95, 96, that season, they added Rodman. They had the best season until the Golden State Warriors beat that. They had a 72, I think, and 10 regular season, the best of all time. And then Golden State beat them since then. They beat the Sonics 4-2 in the series. So that was another tough one for them as well.
Yeah, those teams, I mean, Sean Kemp, Gary Payton, those when George Karl was the coach. And it's, I mean, that was, it was just, that seemed to be when he was, I don't know when he was, I mean, his prime was those whole 8-year period, including the year and a half he was off. But that, I mean, that's when he was at this, like, just this extra level. Like, even before that, when he got through the Pistons, he put on some body weight. He kind of started playing more with his mind. And he says it at the end, he was playing with his body and his mind.
Right.
So as he developed, he was a smarter basketball player than before. He was going less and less, those dazzling moves through the air, the dunk and stuff like that. I mean, just remarkable what he did. Players don't play like him anymore. The fadeaway jump shots, just the scoring. I mean, the scoring, and he still averaged what, 5 or 6 rebounds a game or something like that.
Right.
His steals. I mean, he was just, there's just nothing like him ever.
Yeah, I mean, 90-91, he had 31 point in the finals, 31.2 points a game, 56% shooting percentage, and about 6 to 7 rebounds a game. So he was all around. I mean, defensive, offensive, mental toughness. 97, 98, those 2 years, 96, 97, 97, 98, those 2 years, they beat the Jazz, both tough series. And in 97, 98, there's only 2 times it was forced to a game 7 in the playoffs. And that was it, man. Jordan would just, when he got to the finals, he'd get things done. Utah gave him a bit of a challenge in this last year. And then again, like you said, the debate was, he played with his mind and his body, but the debate was, could they have won the 7th? And they just didn't go to that. Everything changed. They didn't come back together. The team just didn't form. I think they could have won a 7th if they brought that team back.
The thing that separates him, though, is he's also a leader in the locker room. You can look at this in any sport. Usually have guys that want to be a leader that don't have the talent. And you have guys that, they have the talent, but they don't want to be a leader. Kawhi Leonard, he's not as outspoken. Just the way he got his group together, the way he motivated people, and he knew how to push everybody's buttons. Tom Brady, I think, is similar to that. The only person I can think of, especially in this modern day, where you can say he's a good leader and he's the best player in the game. How many times can you actually say that, where he is that talented and he's that leader in the locker room? And plus, you have to win to be respected. If you don't win, it's just hard to be respected in any sport or anything in life. And he won, he led, and he had the heart, he had everything. And to go back to your point about the 7th, listen, anything could happen. But I was reading something that Barkley said, and I remember it from the time. This is what I actually remembered too. They didn't want to pay anybody. The owner didn't want to pay. I don't think they had a salary cap back then. They could have, I don't think they did. They could have paid, because they were giving them stupid contracts to people.
Right.
Like Sean Bradley and all these crazy players.
Sean Bradley.
So like,
7-5.
He didn't want to pay anyone. And then Barkley had an interesting interview, and he was talking about how, what's his name? The guy, Horace Grant, they let him go. He was really good on the team. And they just they didn't want to pay anybody. They barely paid Jordan enough throughout his career. The last couple of years he made his money. But I mean, Pippen, they said that was kind of his fault on that contract. But, and at the end, Reinsdorf, kind of a little little BS artist, but he's trying to say all those guys. He says it, though. He just says it in a different way. The market value of those guys shot up because they won a title, and they were going to go get paid somewhere else for a couple of years. And even Pippen, he never performed when he left Chicago onto that level at all. So all the guys were going to get paid. And Jordan said, they could all signed 1-year deals. Yeah, but he didn't want to pay. And he didn't even want to pay Jordan what he was getting paid. I mean, it was the owner that didn't want to pay. And he was trying to bring Krause, which I think Krause has an ego. He wanted to do it on his own. He was getting the next coach ready, stuff like that. But that happens. The ego gets into it all the time.
Right. All right. Let's talk about his mental game here. I think his mental game was second to none. I've read the book, Tim Grover, his coach, his trainer. I've read the book on how he talks about Jordan being the cleaner above LeBron James, better work ethic, better than anybody. Wade was also a cleaner in his opinion, cleaner meaning a guy that's just second to none in work ethic. So let's talk about 96-97 season. It's the flu game. It's game 5. And in the documentary, they talk about a pizza being delivered to the hotel room because Jordan was hungry. He was late. They had this pizza delivered. He ate the entire pizza. So it was food poisoning, but this is the weird thing. The documentary doesn't dive into this. I found this kind of weird. It's 5 guys delivering the pizza, which is weird. Why would 5 guys deliver a pizza? And they wanted to see Jordan. Is Jordan in the room? They kind of knew pizza was delivered to Jordan. I wonder what was put in that pizza to make Jordan sick. And why would these guys want to poison him? It was probably Utah fans.
The first part of it to me isn't that big a coincidence. He's Michael Jordan. I mean, if you knew and you were closed and it was late at night, they said, and say in this day and age, whoever it was in the area, LeBron James, and maybe he brought his friends to go try to sneak a peek at Jordan. To me, that wasn't as crazy. The 5 guys going up just to try to see who he was.
Right.
Listen, I don't know how he got sick. It could have been a coincidence. I mean, it could have been just a bad ingredient, or it could have been on purpose. But and it's funny because I've been to Utah and I love Salt Lake City. It's beautiful, especially at Christmas time. It's one of the nicest places I've been, the cleanest cities. But then you talk about it, and those friggin' fans are out of control between food poisoning and then his family said that they weren't even allowed to go to the stadium. I mean, it's weird. That's one of the nicest places I've been, Salt Lake City, but the people there were so nice, and all those Mormons. I mean, it's nice, but then all of a sudden you got those animals in the stands. I mean, it reminds me, if you're thinking football, I don't know, maybe Minnesota Vikings, how it's just crazy.
Eagles.
No, Philly's a different city. I'm talking this little city, like the Twin Lakes on the whatever in Minnesota. It's a nice city. You don't expect. Then you get in that Metrodome. I mean, look, you saw these people dressed up like animals in the stands. That's what it reminded me of football wise. But Salt Lake City is so nice. All those Mormons. I mean, not a bad thing to say. All of a sudden, it's the most hostile place to play for the Bulls. There's food poisoning and everything. I thought that was pretty funny.
Well, yeah, going back to his work ethic, and I think just add to that, I think it's because these people haven't really seen a lot of success, and there's this big event, and they just kind of come out, just kind of like, you know, you've been under, let's say, you know, house arrest and then you get to finally go out. So I think it's just one of those things that's just letting loose. But yeah, going back to the mental game, man, like he was really out of that for that game, and it's just finding that extra gear and pulling it out, and he did that the same way Scottie Pippen did. With his back, I think it was 98 series, 97, 98. I think it was where Pippen had his back was messed up and he was in there as a decoy, you know, pulling it out and he was hurt. So,
you know, I'm sorry to interrupt you. You know, something funny. I just have to tell you, isn't it ironic that Pippen did it then, but when he had the migraine, it was totally different. I'm wondering if he learned from that game and then, you know, they just used more of as a decoy and he gutted it out that time. Listen, I've never had migraines, so I'm not knocking it or anything, but it's kind of ironic because he didn't really play much in that game a few years back when he had that migraine. And all of a sudden he he just muscled through it.
Right. So I think part of the reason where I think he sat out for that one shot. Remember, there's this one shot. I can't remember what game it was where they made Kukoc shake the shot and Pippen was upset. I don't know what episode that was in, but I think it was just he was getting the lack of disrespect, the lack of contract being paid. So sometimes I felt that maybe he just wasn't getting paid. And then this last game, he's like, okay, I'm all in with the Bulls. It's the last dance. I'm going to go all out. So maybe it was definitely a mental thing.
Well, that time was with Kukoc. Jordan wasn't on the team, and it was Pippen's chance to be the man. So that's all it was about. It was an ego thing. I want to be the man. I should get the last shot. That's it. That's what it was about. It wasn't about anything else in that situation. And that he's like, you know, screw this. You giving the shot to Tony Kukoc. You know, I'm better than him. I want to take the last shot. Jordan's not here. It's my team right now. That's what that was about. But even on the mental toughness for Jordan, yeah, just everything though. I mean, the mental toughness on every single game. You know, the mind games, that's different than mental toughness, but that he almost played him with himself. He got motivation. Sometimes, I don't know if he made it up sometimes, they said, but like other times it was real. And it was crazy. It was out of control, the way his mind works. And that's all he cared about. Like I told you before, Republicans buy sneakers too. All he gave a shit about was winning basketball games.
I think that's important. I think right now we're caught up with too many distractions and his focus is phenomenal. And imagine him in this era. So going back to the debate now, when you look at Jordan and LeBron, I've seen games where, you know, the series is over and, you know, there's 5 minutes left and LeBron's on the bench and they're down by, let's say 10. Why would LeBron go and sit on the bench? I can't tell you what game that was, but I know it happened a couple of years ago where LeBron got pulled out of he actually just sat down the rest of the game because he knew the series was over. They were done. And why not fight to the bitter last minute to try to win? You know, that's the difference between Jordan and LeBron. Jordan had the mental toughness that nobody could duplicate. I'm telling you right now, it's going to be very hard to get into that type of mindset.
Well,
yeah, it's definitely,
you know, I think you look at the load management too, which was a bunch of BS, like guys taking games off and stuff like that. It's just a different era, man. That's all it is. The load management, guys getting tired. Yeah, I agree with you. The other thing that I think you have to consider, in all fairness to LeBron and some of the younger guys, is they start, you know, he didn't play college. He's played a lot longer career, I believe, than Michael Jordan had. Played more wear and tear on his body, more wear and tear on his legs. I see that. It doesn't make an excuse for sitting out the last 10 minutes. But even last year, LeBron wasn't all with it, you know, but this year he was playing really good at a really high level. But they're different types of players. To me, LeBron is more of a Scottie Pippen on steroids that can score. He can score. And he's more of in the mold of a Scottie Pippen, where he can do it all, be that point forward. You know, like, I don't want to say Magic Johnson. He's like a blend of, but he's a better scorer than those guys were. And he's not a two guard like Michael Jordan was, the typical two guard. He made the two guard popular. Before that, you had Magic, you had Larry. I mean, Bill Russell years before that. But Michael Jordan was a scorer first. I don't want to say first, everything else came with it, the winning and everything and the stats, but he was a two guard. They're different kinds of players. So like, it's hard. That's why there's no comparison to me. And I do think, you know, Michael, you can't be like that Tim Duncan, that Shaq, and it's hard to be a big man or a four and take that last shot of the game. Usually those guys don't have the jump shots. They're easy to foul. You know, to be the greatest player of all time, a lot of people used to say back in the day, two guard, because that's who you get the ball in their hands at the top of the circle, and then they can just create their own shot. Like, you can't give the ball to Shaq at the top of the circle. You know what I mean? Like, you can give it to LeBron. He's going to do things, but like, he was just the prototypical. He had everything lined up for him. The stars were aligned for him to be the greatest.
Yeah, I mean, Jordan, right?
Yeah, of course,
yeah. So yeah, I mean, so what would you rate this documentary out of 10? How did it make you feel?
I mean, I would give it a 9, just because I felt it could have been better in certain ways, and it wasn't perfect. 8 or 9, but I mean, I enjoyed every minute of it. Maybe
I give it an 8. I give it an 8.
Yeah. The other thing I was going to say is Kobe's modeled his game after Jordan. He was another two guard, and him, you can see the similarities in the style they played, how you get the ball, how you win games at the end. That's why they're just different kinds of players than a guy who they played different positions. Like Tim Duncan was one of the greatest players of all time. I mean, he's remarkable, but he's a different position. And it's just like, the greatest player of all time can't be a center, can't be a power forward in my mind. It has to be that guy that, you know, he's just and then LeBron's an MVP. You know what? One thing LeBron did better than Jordan, when you put LeBron on a team, I think if there's 4 other shitty players in this top starting 5, I think he used to do this. He used to bring Cleveland to the playoffs every year, but he wouldn't win it with them. But I don't know if Jordan would have that same impact. LeBron makes everybody around him a lot better. Jordan did too, but I think that's the only thing maybe like that. I think LeBron may have a little more value than he can take a team a little, like, you know, just putting him on that team automatically makes them a playoff team. I don't know if you could have said that about Jordan when he was in his younger days.
See, but the thing is, LeBron actually, I think he got carried a little bit. Bosh and Wade were better than, I'd say, Rodman and Pippen, right?
I mean, that's a good story, but also you have the salary cap now too, so you didn't have the competition back then was a lot stronger,
right?
Even the Hawks with Dominique Wilkins. I mean, like you saw the Pacers in that series, but there's players you didn't even see in that series. I mean, like it's just out of control. I mean, Dominique Wilkins. I mean, you didn't even see much about, you know, you see the Knicks a little bit. You saw the Cavs a couple years. I mean, those Cavs could. Now, how good would they be? Stockton, Malone, and even Hornacek was on that team. I mean, nobody really liked those guys. But they expected that. No, I not like them, but I'm saying they're not like, they're hard to root for. I mean, they're Stockton and Malone, boring pick and roll offense. Stockton was one of the best point guards of all time. Great players, but they're not like super fan favorites outside of Utah, where you're going to put their poster on the wall. You know, you don't grow up. I don't those guys as much as you do. Like even Reggie Miller, he was phenomenal, but you don't have that competition now. You didn't have that competition then with Bosh and Wade. It's just salary cap changes things. You just can't have that competition. You have it more important. It plays, you know, it's funny. It plays to the draft now, but that's how the Bulls built their team with their top 2 players with Pippen. They traded for him in that remarkable trade. And then they had Jordan. I don't know where they got like the Horace Grants and the guys that came right after that, but it's just a different era altogether. And the competition was out of control back then. It was just crazy.
It was tough guys too, man. Tough. And no, you didn't even talk about it, but Akeem Olajuwon was a great player back then. One of the greatest ones.
He won 2 titles. I mean, Hakeem was the #1 pick in the draft. Then it was, what was it? Sam Bowie. Then it was Jordan. And I mean, you can't fault Houston for taking Hakeem. Hakeem was unbelievable.
Right.
He won 2. I think he won the 2 years, right? Where Jordan was off.
I can't remember, to be honest.
Yeah, they beat the, I know they beat the Knicks one year, I believe. And I think the Magic the other year, was it? I'm not sure, but Hakeem was unbelievable. I mean, he's just phenomenal. The talent was crazy. It was just, I mean, you saw Detroit, the Celtics won what, 2 or 3 titles in the 80s. In the 80s, the Celtics won 3 titles. I think didn't the Lakers win 5? And then Pistons won one, and I think the Rockets won another one, something like that. Or the Philadelphia 76ers or something, and won in 83 maybe. But you just have remarkable basketball. It was just something else.
So do you watch basketball as much now or not as no, I can't watch it as much.
I don't man, it's just boring. Like if you watch the playoffs through The Last Dance and you just go back and it you know, triggers some things in your mind and you say how good and how electrifying was it. Even in that end in that last episode with the lights were shining on Phil Jackson, you don't have that feeling anymore. You ever go sit in an arena? Like I've been to some basketball games, just go to Madison Square Garden, whatever. It's just, you don't have that. Like even when they had Spreewell, when they had Larry Johnson, like it was fun. Now it's like, it's not there. It's just a bunch of like posterized moves, a bunch of guys who want to be on posters. I mean, you got guys like Anthony Davis making $100-something million a year, who's never proved himself as you know, winning a title. He's a great player, and they may win this year if the NBA ever comes back. But you just have guys that never. I just don't get it. These guys get paid, and these guys just don't perform. I mean, you got guys that have made hundreds of millions of dollars. Guys even in the past, like Joe Johnson. All these guys that are good players. Like everybody wanted like Kyrie Irving this year. I mean, he had, you know, a couple good years in his career, really good years. You know, it's just, I mean, I can go on and on about it, but today's basketball, you just don't get that same feeling.
No, it doesn't feel the same. It doesn't feel the same. And maybe because we were younger back then and everything felt bigger than life. I don't know. I mean, if you saw, I think that series versus where was the Pistons in the documentary, I mean, Jordan was getting beat up, like literally beat up. And he kept coming, and he was a small guy. Then he had to bulk up in the series. So, man, I mean, just talk about mental toughness. Now you see LeBron get touched, and he falls back and flops. And, you know, he's a big, strong guy. So I don't understand. I guess it's part of the game. It's like soccer now. You know, you get a kick, and they flop and draw the foul. It's so annoying. It's got to stop. And I wish it somehow came back to this. I wish it did.
It is because they make more money, and I think they don't want to be touched as much, as funny as that sounds. Fair enough. You make more money, you just tend not to work as hard. I'm not saying all the guys do, but I mean, you can go down the list. I mean, look at Barkley just shouting out Joel Embiid a month or so ago, calling him, I don't know if he called him soft or whatever he did. I mean, these guys just don't have what they had back then. It's just a whole generation, though. It's a whole video game playing generation. It's a whole bunch of soft people. There's a lot of other things, a lot of mental health these days. There's a lot of other factors that go into it. It's just a different generation, and maybe they don't have the heart and the desire. Back then, they didn't make a lot of money, especially in the early 80s. So a lot of guys played more for the love of the game. They could have made more money in other things too. But it just, I think there was more playing for the love of the game back then.
Makes sense.
Now.
Makes sense. Well, thanks, Tom. That covers it a lot, man. So if you guys haven't seen it, go watch The Last Dance. I watched it on Netflix. I don't know where you guys want to watch it, but man, good, man. It brought me back. It brought me back, and that was something that, you know, that was the best part of it. It was just going back to that time, and I might watch it again. You know, I might want to go back on YouTube and watch some of these matchups again.
You know what was exciting? You live up in Toronto, right? So, like, even Kawhi Leonard, though, he had a good playoffs. Was it last year? Or whenever it was like so long ago before he went to the Clippers. I mean, he, you know, when they beat the 76ers, that was actually one of the better playoff performances and one of the more electrifying things. You know, he beat the Warriors, who I just don't root for the Warriors, so I liked it. And I thought it was one of the more exciting, I guess, playoffs in recent years. A few years before that, when LeBron came back from 3-1, I guess it's more because a lot of times you root for the underdog to win it, and that when LeBron came back from 3-1 and Kyrie had the performance of his lifetime in those finals, I think that was phenomenal. But I mean, it's even the Warriors. Like, I mean, they had Draymond Green, Kevin Durant. I mean, they're just locked and loaded, and I don't think they would even stand a chance against playing against like Jordan's Bulls. I think they would get beat up. Right. The other thing I want to point out in that documentary, I mean, it's funny how even Krause, he made all those right moves to get all the right players. He got rid of Oakley for Bill Cartwright, and Oakley turned out to be a phenomenal player with the Knicks and was with Chicago. And he was a guy who would protect Jordan. They even said it, he was his protector. But just, I mean, to have the right role players in place at those times, even the Luke Longleys, the Bill Wenningtons, and it was just a very, very John Paxson. It's just those guys that knew their role and they stood with it. Nowadays, you get guys who are in those roles, but then they want to be the star. Those guys knew they would never be a star, and they accepted it. And that's the other part of it. This day and age, everybody has an ego. Every second round pick thinks they're a first round pick. Every bench player thinks they're a starter. Every role player thinks they're a star. So that's the other factor.
That's a good point. That is a good point. There's not a lot of Mark Messiers to Wayne Gretzky's as much now. It's everybody wants to be a Wayne Gretzky or a Jordan, right?
Yeah, I don't really watch hockey, but I get what you're saying.
You know what I mean? All right, guys. So the debate below, I'm going to go Jordan, and I think Tom's on the same page. Jordan over LeBron, and this debate will end when the next great player comes out, and it'll be that player versus Jordan. Because I don't think, and the nice thing about this documentary, I'm going to end this with this, is that a lot of the younger people are now aware of Jordan more and saw the grit that he had to go through. So this is going to sway a lot more people on the Jordan side, in my opinion.
I think the generation now that has no idea what he did.
Yeah.
100%.
It's going to open it up. So, guys, leave a comment below. Let me know. Jordan, LeBron debate. What do you guys think of the documentary? And hope you guys enjoyed this recap and review of The Last Dance. And, man, open things up for you guys, giving you guys some extra content here, talking sports with Tom Santinello, Fire and Ice. And we are out, Tom. Thanks.